I spent most of that first week on my 240D doing the exterior detailing on this car. I know some of you are thinking, well, Kent, why are you spending time polishing the car when there's probably mechanical issues that need to be dealt with? And that's true when you acquire one of these rolling restorations. But there are two reasons why I always believe when you get a rolling restoration like this that you should make the car pretty right away. Number one, I've often said the honeymoon is over in 30 days. So you have that enthusiasm of having a new car or a new acquisition to an old car, and you're going to get out there and really make it look pretty, like I am kind of obsessed with making this thing look absolutely gorgeous. The other reason is I believe that if you make the car look pretty when you first get it, it will keep the motivation high as you go to work on other issues. Because every time you walk into your garage or walk out to your carport or walk into your shop, you're going to look at it just like this 240D here and say, wow, isn't that pretty? So I've been buffing. We took all the side trim off, we took the trunk trim off, and we went to town with a power buffer and totally buffed out this paint. And I've often said, if you really want to know whether or not your W123 is rust-free, take these side chrome pieces off, because you may see a little rust forming in these holes. And if you do, you need to fix that. And the miracle paint is the best way to fix this. Now, throughout this video and throughout this entire series, I'll just be referencing things. Like, for instance, I'm not going to show you how I buffed this car out today, because I've already done a bunch of videos on buffing things out. I'm not going to show you in detail how to remove and replace chrome strips on a W123, because I've already got a bunch of videos, and I've got videos that come free of charge with my kits when you want to do this yourself. So I'll be referencing a lot of things throughout this episode and the episodes to come, because there's going to be a lot of things that I'm going to fix, replace, repair on this 240D, and almost all of them I've already done videos on, or I have parts and kits that will help you do these repairs yourself. Now, what I'm about to take on is going to take a lot of time. If you were to send this to a mechanic and do what I'm going to be doing over the next month, it would cost you well in excess of $10,000, maybe close to $20,000. And I doubt whether you'd find any mechanic that's going to take all your chrome strips off, clean them, and polish them, and add 303 protectant before I reinstall them on the car. I mean, if you're going to ask somebody to do all that. But one of the great things about these W123s, and I've said this over and over again, these are fun cars to work on. Obviously, if you don't like working on cars, you probably shouldn't own one of these, okay? But if you're willing to roll up your sleeves and do some of the work, it's actually quite enjoyable. Particularly if it's a rolling restoration, you're not going to get discouraged with this major project. But I highly recommend, anytime you get a W123, you remove all the side chrome. Really inspect these holes. This will give you a chance to clean all the gunk and junk out that's collected in behind. You can install these new clips, which will help hold the side trim on. How many 123s have you seen where the side trims kind of hang off or falling off? So same with the trunk emblems. You want to pull those off. There's absolutely no way you can buff under those emblems with them on the trunk. And I'll show you that here in just a second. But I went about trying to find the very best trim that I had laying around, and lo and behold, look at this. I found some new NOS 123 side trim that I'm going to put on this car, and I've gone and found other pieces that are in better condition than the pieces that were originally on the car. So that's what I'm doing right now, is I'm going through all these trim pieces, cleaning them, putting 303 protectant on them, replacing all these red clips. Now, the red clips are something you have to replace if you're going to remove the side trim. Very, very unlikely that you're going to be able to replace it without these clips. And most of the clips come off with a side trim, and the only way you can get those off is to cut them off. And I've got all this information in the video that comes when you purchase these clips from me on my website. I'm going to put together a special kit of clips. We sell these in little packs of 10, but I'm going to put together a set of 58, because that's how many you're going to need for a W123. So I'll put links below. Now remember, you watch one of these episodes, just click on Show More below, and I'm going to list a link to all the information that will give you the follow-up that you need to do these repairs yourself. That includes videos, on-demand videos, YouTube videos. It'll be parts that we have, kits that we have, special instructions that we have, manuals that I've written. All that will be available for these old 123 diesels. So when I go to put these strips back on, I make sure that I thoroughly polish and clean this area. I've also waxed the doors with the acrylic works. I'll put a link below on that product as well, because that's my favorite wax sealant of all time, acrylic works. And now I can install the clips, and then I'm going to put the strips on. And like I show you in my instructional video, we just push these clips on with the end of a round screwdriver. You do not want to scratch the paint. You want to make sure these go on straight. And of course, my instructional video shows you how to get these out, because one of the most important things when you're dealing with this is do not scratch the paint here. If you nick the paint off on these holes, that's where rust starts. And we don't want that. Once you get all the clips in, putting the strip on is pretty easy. You know, once again, look at I've cleaned that all up. I went out and used a degreaser and a brush and washed these thoroughly. You want to make sure it's all lined up, all the holes are lined up, then just hold it and just start on one end using the flat of your hand. Okay, there you go. Yesterday I went around and collected all the W123 chrome strips I had laying around. I probably had about 50 of them. I think I threw half of them away. I've got a couple of good sets left. But I chose the very best ones to put on White Lightning. You know, of course, a lot of these get dents in them, but the biggest problem with these is the edges right here. If you look closely, you can see the edges start to deteriorate on these due to the age of the plastic. And they can get pretty bad. If you're not that particular, it's not a big deal. But of course, I wanted ones that had no dents. Like this, here's a typical dent that you see in these. I wanted no dents, and I wanted no edges that were deteriorating like you see here. Now let's go around to the trunk and I'll explain what I've done there. This one I'm going to polish a little bit before I put it back on. And of course the star just comes off with a 13mm nut, so that's easy. But these are something else. How many 123s have you seen? You look closely at the trunk, these are bent. Because somebody tried to pry them off. And that's what the situation is here. There's just these little plastic plugs. Now we have these plastic plugs on my website if you need to replace those. But I also have an on-demand video on how to take these off so you don't bend them. And let me tell you, it's a little bit trickier than you'd think. I'm going to go ahead and finish up the trunk now. I've waxed behind the license plate bracket, and I've even polished the taillight lenses with acrylic works. The acrylic works is just amazing on plastics. Look at how those taillight lenses shine, particularly for a diesel, because most of the time they're all black and sooted up. And I've got this all waxed, and this I went and found a better diesel emblem off another car that I had kept in stock for a time. But now I get this all done. It'll be on to some other detailing, but that detailing, you know, I can kind of do over the next month or so. Little detailing here and there. Now when I look at the trunk of my 240D, I can get excited about doing a valve adjustment. So let me show you some of the other things we did this past week. And while I was detailing the exterior of the 240D, I took the time to do the engine compartment. Let me show you a couple of before pictures. You're going to look down into here and you say, well, that doesn't look very well maintained. But you won't believe how this is going to look when we get finished detailing it out with our special techniques. And now I'm going to show you the after. When you stand back now and look at this one, it really looks new. Now we've got to detail the engine itself, But when I'm done here, this is going to almost look like a brand new car. If you're interested in finding out more about detailing your own engine compartment like this, just check the multiple links I'm going to leave in the description below this video. So was it worth the effort? That was about 2 hours of work. But man, look at the engine compartment now. And you can see the tremendous change on those white inner fender panels. The condition of the air filter is something you want to check right away, not just on a diesel car, but even on a gas car. But I recommend, if you ever go looking for a diesel to buy, take along a 10mm wrench or socket or a nut driver in case the wing nut is missing, and always open up the air filter housing and inspect it on a diesel before you purchase it. My manual that I wrote on performance tuning for these old engines explains why this is so important. But we're just going to take and open this up real quick. This will show us two things, give us an idea how well the car has been maintained. It'll also give us an idea of the internal engine health of this diesel. Well, look at that. Amazing. In recent years, this is one of the cleanest air filters I've seen. And look at how clean it is inside. That's a real good sign. So I'm going to take a little cleaner and just wipe out the bottom. And I can put this air filter right back on. It's still good. And it'll probably be good for another 12,000 miles. In last week's video, you saw me get super excited about that fuel door. Well, take a look at this fuse box door. Look at that. And of course, we found some real gremlins in here. I'll link you to a video, if you haven't already seen it, of one of the big electrical problem we had with this car, and it turned out to be something as simple as just replacing a fuse. But we did the complete fuse box service here, cleaned it up, put all new fuses in, and now I detailed out the box cover, and we're going to put this back in. And this is another project I can check off the list. Look at that. That about wraps it up for week one. I know some of you are thinking, well, Kent, that's not very much work you did for a whole week. Well, keep in mind, when I do these episodes, there's summary episodes of things I've done during the previous week. This is not the only thing I'm working on. I've got some projects over there on Cherry that I'm working on. I'm working on Crunchy's V8 engine outside, trying to get it started. So please keep that in mind if you want to be critical and say, Kent, you're not working fast enough. This is about as fast as I can work when I have a bunch of balls I'm trying to juggle in the air at the same time. Now, you have to admit that we are making progress here on White Lightning. And I think White Lightning is going to stick. The first time I said that, it was a joke, like this is the fastest 240D I've ever seen. But the more I thought about it, the first time I saw a white 240D, I was struck by lightning. So it kind of has a double meaning. If you watch that first episode, you'll understand. And since I have a lot of the major exterior paint detailing done, in week two I'm going to tackle a few other things. There are 3 things that you should remove if you own a W123, 240D, 300D, or 300TD. And those 3 things can cause a lot of problems if they're not looked into closely after acquiring one of these cars, or whether you've owned one for a while and haven't really checked them out. The first thing is the battery and the battery tray. Now, when I was detailing the engine compartment up here, I noticed some rust in the battery tray, and those of you who've been around 123s, you know right away that we better pull that battery and pull that tray and take a good close look underneath the battery. So that's number one. Number 2 is the sunroof. And this is one a lot of people ignore. I mean, I see it all the time when I work on these cars. It's like people think the sunroof's just going to run forever and they never have to do anything inside the sunroof. Well, this one obviously is working. You can see it's moving back and forth. Yeah, pretty good. You know, I've seen them really go slow, and if they're going real slow, then you need to do some work on it. You do some damage to the mechanism. But my big concern here is the fuzzies on these side seals have worn off. So we may actually have some problems with some plugged drains on the sunroof. You got to be really careful about that. There's also, you know, the evidence of maybe a slight amount of rust starting up here. That's another issue. But really, the only way to deal with this is just take the sunroof out. You can't really lubricate the tracks thoroughly without removing the roof. Now, if you have one, you've had the roof out, and you're going to re-lubricate like every couple of years, You can do that. You can put some sunroof grease in the tracks, but to get an old W123 that's never had anything done with the sunroof, you got to take the sunroof off. And you got to clean the felts, you got to clean the tracks, you got to clean the drains, and replace the seals if you can still get them. So the sunroof is going to be number 2, and then the other thing is the bumpers. Now this is the one thing people laugh about. They say, Kent, why would you want to remove the bumpers? Right away, you can see this front rubber piece is falling off. I mean, this is so common. I've done other videos on this. I've even done a kit on how to fix this, so this doesn't happen again. So we'll take a close look at that. We're also looking for corrosion. Some other things, the license plate bracket is bent. But more importantly, I want to inspect everything in behind where the bumper bolts onto the car, and particularly these side rubber pieces. We'll talk more about that and how important that is in next week's episode. Well, those 3 things are on my priority list. I'm not sure I'll get to all of them next week. It's also summer here in the Pacific Northwest. I might want to goof off for a while. So if I can't get a lot done, at least I'll report back on every Monday. Okay, every Monday evening I will report back. Okay, here's the status of White Lightning. This is what I've done. And if I have to, I'll be humble enough to admit I didn't get anything done. But at least you'll get to hear from me on a regular basis on the restoration of this car. And I'm sure you're thinking, well, what about the mechanical stuff? That's coming probably in week 3 and week 4, where we dig into doing some mechanical restoration on this white 240D.